and thank you, Steven.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. So I think for those of you who aren't at Brainstorm the other night, I'll probably cover some of the ground that we kind of went over there. Just kind of get a background into yourself. I'm being born. Now live in the States. And we can from there. So I mean, just tell us a wee bit about your sort of background, how you sort of gone from there. You were a stockbroker or something?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Aberdeen, went to Cults Academy and that sort of thing, and then at 18 for a while I was a stockbroker and a trader, and then came back here and worked for Abtrust, part of Aberdeen Asset Management, became a head dealer there, and then came to my senses and left at 22, flew to LA to work for producer Roger Corman, who was the only place in the world I wanted to start in film. For those of you who don't know, Roger Corman's kind of a legendary B-movie producer. Sort of everyone who's anyone in Hollywood kind of got their breaks from him in a way. I mean, people like Martin Scorsese, Francis Coppola, Robert De Niro, James Cameron, the list goes on and on. He was, for about 10 years, he was the only person pretty much to give Jack Nicholson a job, even had him writing for him to keep him and his family fed. And so it was kind of the only place I wanted to start, and I kind of went there for a while and got a kind of baptism by fire kind of thing, and then came back to Scotland and shot Ties about 4 months after I returned from LA, which was my first feature and was also the first film to be shot in Aberdeen, the first feature film. Actually, still the only one that's so far that's actually shot on film itself. Yeah, and then.
So that was your second feature.
That was the second one. Yeah, I mean, there'd been some other stuff done in the meantime, but it was. I mean, Ties was made in the 90s, and right up until the end of the 90s, it was near impossible to raise money in the UK for film. So, there was a lot of clamming around for a while, money coming together, money falling through a couple of times, the usual sort of thing, and produced something for somebody else and did my first documentary as well, and then went into Scottish Screen with The Ticking Man, which I thought was such a long shot with them because it was much more commercial than a lot of the ideas that normally go through there. But I kind of dared them in a sense with the budget. I kind of went in at a level that they actually really took a punt on it in a sense. I mean, they actually just saw it as kind of development for me. And so just ran away and did it. It's kind of funny actually doing a Q&A about something where I've kind of done, a couple of major projects since and some other things. So it's kind of winding the clock back. It's quite nice.
What year, how long ago was that?
Well, we shot it in 2001 and it premiered, the post-production took quite a long time because of, the split screens were a lot of work.
I read something somewhere that was saying that 2,300
Well, there was about 2,300 edits or something in total, I think. And to put it in context, I think it's about 2.5 times at least a regular film, maybe 3 times. But the split screens itself is layers and layers beyond that as well. So, work, it was, the software couldn't handle the film in a way. Even though it was a modestly made film in post-production terms, it was, and because the budget wasn't much, I did it all pretty much. And so it premiered at the Montreal Film Festival in 2003, and then sort of did the rounds from there, and then sort of went to market, and I think it's available in probably population-wise about a third of the world. But China's one of those territories, so that takes up a reasonable chunk of that.
So how did the film come about? How did you write it?
Well, it was funny, but actually, Razbom and The Ticking Man, ironically, Razbom played on Sunday night and was the first Universal story ever set in an American Indian reservation. And the funny thing is that these both had a very similar gestation, which was me and an investor sitting in a pub in Edinburgh, and him going, well, I'll give you some money if. And, he gave us money to shoot the promo of what became Razbom, but the rest of the money didn't quite materialize. And with this one, he gave me money to go to LA and try and cast it. And then it was slightly different themed in the early drafts. And then when I was in LA, Dunblane happened, and we just shelved it. And then, because it was slightly different, as I say, the premise wasn't about a criminal at that time. And so, with the premise change, it became something quite different. Although a lot of what was going on in terms of tension and drama was similar.
So the location itself, I mean, obviously, ties into the plot and this, time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite unusual to be set in such a remote kind of. I mean, was that a conscious thing, or was it always kind of?
Well, actually, you're asking about gestation, and it was that thing where the investor basically said, "Well, do something commercial," and for me, an action movie typically works best where action naturally happens. The States is a great place because they frequently kill each other there. It's. I mean, I tell you, I've lived in areas in LA where you hear a clip being unloaded on a weekly basis, and so then it was a case of, but why do it in Scotland in a way that wouldn't work anywhere else the same way? Action movies typically revolve around guns. We are the most anti-gun culture pretty much you're going to find on Earth. So how can you play into that? Well, then a gun becomes something extreme and extremely powerful. It's not like a cop's just going to suddenly shoot back, or doing this in the States. It's like everyone would be in their sock drawer pulling out 45s and shooting back. So that suddenly became an interesting thing. And then again, and sort of playing into the remoteness and how to make that work. And then it sort of became a case, so it was almost like it becomes a mixture of almost the Western and the Terminator, in the sense that the guy is pretty much unstoppable in real terms. I mean, but also it's so remote. It's like a single street lawless town, and its own rules are kind of set up within that period. So then it started becoming interesting. And then the other thing with it as well is action movies have stars. So here's one where we don't have any. So how can we make that work for us? Well, suddenly everyone becomes vulnerable. Because in the final scene, Bruce Willis isn't going to walk out with a ripped shirt holding a puppy with a building burning behind them. And, so there was this sense of knowing that everyone was going to be vulnerable. And so, yeah. And that sort of was interesting to me. And then, but we shot in and around Edinburgh. We didn't go we went about an hour away from Edinburgh. That's about as far as we went. Well, actually, I tell a lie. We Sladen's Castle. I do tell a lie. Now, and that was supposed to be shot in 2 days, but one of our actors fell ill and we had to put it off, and it ended up rolling into a day it was a minibus being driven, so it wasn't very fast. It was about 6 hours of travel within that day. And, so it was a jam-packed day, and the funny thing is I look at that scene now, and there were certain things meant to be happening at the end. After the grenade goes off, Jack's supposed to lay into him, and they go at it and all these other things. But, light was beginning to fade, and so we just kind of cranked up the pace, and a lot of the stuff at the end was just shot. We didn't get any coverage on it. And the funniest thing is that there are times when you're filming and you just walk away and you just go, no, we just haven't got it. And one was the grenade going off. I had this ash which I'd taken from a fireplace, and these rubber rocks that I'd kind of made, foam I'd kind of made to look like rocks. And I had the actors, and literally light is going, and I'm like, okay, fall back, and I'm throwing this over them. Okay, next, on to the next actor. And I think I did a take each, because we had no time, and I just thought, that is awful. And there's no way that is ever going to work. I'm going to have to shoot something in Edinburgh or whatever. But the funny thing is, when I suddenly thought, we've got to pull a rabbit out of a hat here, and they slowed it down to almost, a frame a half second kind of thing, suddenly it was like you became trapped in this kind of interesting space. So, it was purely necessity, though. It wasn't design.
How long did the whole thing take to shoot then? I mean,
Oh, the shoot was about 18 days. I mean, it was quick. But the great thing about it, and this was, for those of you that don't know, filming can take an incredibly slow amount of time to do, and the biggest reason is lighting. But the big advantage we had here was it was all daylight, and the only bit of lighting artificial in the entire film, other than the light bulb in the jail cell, which I think was just a natural bulb, was the the 2-pound torch the girl had underneath the stairs. I mean, that we would just use that as was, and so that allowed us to shoot very quickly. Really freed us up.
And it's just editing, sort of like
Yeah. I mean, something like this is a lot of it's about rhythm, and a lot of it's about testing the waters. I mean, it's like the scene under the stairs with the girl. I mean, the first time I edited it, it got a nice reaction, but it was clear from that I could almost milk it more in a sense. It was kind of interesting. I think it's the easiest scene I've ever directed in my life, but because it's just camera moves in on Dora, camera moves in on her, closer and closer back and forth, and it's just putting in the sound. But the idea is so potent that everyone can just put themselves into that situation. And then it was just a case of, just trying to get the timing right for people's attention. Although always the difficult thing you got to gauge as a director is kind of whose attention in a way, because what you're trying to figure out is who is the audience, because not everyone likes, tastes vary so dramatically, and so it's sort of that thing of, making it work for that person who's squirming in the audience with the character most, so there's a lot of guesswork.
So the music as well, I think we were saying about momentum in the film. I think music does sort of add momentum to the film. Are you involved in the music side as well, or was that did you dabble?
Yeah, well, I've sort of started doing this kind of unusual way of doing the music. I mean, the theme, and at the beginning and the end, and at a couple of other points, and the montage when the guy's driving the minibus are both tracks that I licensed. The majority of the rest of it, basically what I did was I licensed a whole library of beautifully composed music of a whole different varieties, and then I would go in and I would find the elements that I'd like. For example, in the scene at Slane's at the end, there's a bit, it's just boom, 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 and it just keeps going throughout it. That was just the first few notes to, some big orchestral number. I just take that out, I loop it, I find a cello that I like, pop it in, and so it's just creating it in the edit in a way, kind of like picture with a lot more layers. And
it's definitely a key thing in a lot of films, especially thrillers, that you do need sort of music.
Yeah. And actually, the sequel to this, the same library, they had a couple of discs from another Aberdeen connection, Evelyn Glennie. And, one of the great percussionists of the world. And it's almost like on this disc, she throws in the stuff she could never commercially do, because it's really crazy stuff. But when you're doing a thriller, it's just stuff that puts the hairs in the back of your neck up. So, some of the stuff you can get is fantastic, and costs you almost nothing.
Okay, and so any other sort of projects happening at the moment then, or are you going to film here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it always just depends on finance. I mean, the last couple of years there's been some interest from very significant companies in Los Angeles over a big budget remake of this, because the premise, as they would say out there, is very high concept in terms of the hitman having a fixed amount of time to remove these witnesses. So there's a script which I've written set now in Alaska, and it's actually a wonderful script, much more in depth than this. Set in Alaska with sort of much bigger stakes, and so it's with some very interesting people at the moment. So if any of them got behind it, it would be quite amazing. And then there's a drama series I'm setting up, trying to set up for Aberdeen, which would be kind of a prime time series. And they're the key things. But it's also now getting Resbaum out there and promoting it. My latest film, and that's been. I just actually recently got back. I was touring it. I sort of created a mobile cinema to tour it around this reservation that it was filmed on, because there's no real. People there will have literally gone their whole life without ever having an opportunity to see a movie on a big screen. So since I shot it there, it was kind of nice to bring it direct to them, and they've been responding fantastically well to it, which is a great thing, because as I say, it was originally written in Edinburgh, and I rewrote it to be done there. But the thing is, when you go somewhere that has had so much cultural oppression upon them over the years, you want to make sure that you do it respectfully, and the reaction there has been phenomenal, and just pure praise, which is quite fantastic, and certainly, it's a pity it wasn't the other way around, and in terms of this was the first screening, and you had a chance still to see that one, because it's pretty unique.
Enjoyable. So I suppose to wrap up, for me sort of speaking, any sort of advice for any sort of wannabe filmmakers or people that are starting off, or just anything that you could advise? Your own experiences?
Well, one of the things that I've found interesting when I've been talking to some of the people around this week has been when they talk about cinema and Aberdeen and making films here, and they say, well, but who really wants to give you much money to make a film up here? And my point is the film industry doesn't care. Film industry doesn't care where your film is set. They want a great script that they can attach a big cast to, and that they know they're going to make a lot of money to, or have a hope of making a lot of money with. And that's pretty much it. And the problem from then on is if you're coming from a basic level, how do you access that? But I've always found that the bigger the company, the easier to meet, ironically, because they're better resourced, and that's how they get into that position. My first feature, Ties, I could have shot anywhere in the world. Resbomb, which I did in the reservation, I could have shot in Aberdeen. It's not a big deal. The Ticking Man, I could have shot 20 miles from here. Likewise, we could do a $50 million one with stars and explosions for 30 miles from here. So I think don't get caught up with thinking of in terms of local limitations. And likewise, the industry is there to be accessed. And I said this to a few people in this room will have heard this already, but 3.5 years ago, I made 2 phone calls in LA in the same day. The first was to an American producer who's done some reasonable sized movies. And she said, where are you from? I said, Aberdeen. She said, oh, whereabouts? I said, Cults. And she said, oh, I used to teach at the American school there in the 70s, which is half a mile from where I grew up. Second call I made was to the William Morris Agency, one of the most powerful agencies in Hollywood. The guy who picked up the phone, I said, hi, my name's Steve Simpson. I'm a filmmaker from Scotland. He said, is that the Steve Simpson that used to live on Abbots Hall Road? Yeah. You remember the kid that used to live in the house opposite? That's me. And he told me that part of the reason he got into the film business was he'd come home from school and he would see the vehicles coming in and out the house when we were shooting Ties, my first feature here. And it was the first time he ever thought that the film business was a viable route and a viable career. I mean, he became a lawyer in the meantime, which is a transferable skill into film for good reasons, sadly. But and he's now a co-producer on Masters of the Universe with Joel Silver. Joel Silver produced films like Lethal Weapon, the Matrix movies, Die Hard movies, and is one of the 5 most successful producers in the last 30 years. And if, I say Masters of the Universe, it's going to be called Grayskull. And if it is made, it will be between $100 and $150 million movie. And this will be the first film he's ever produced. And this is a kid that used to live across the road. So that's, and well, it's not my cup of tea, I have to say. But that's the thing. It's as accessible as you want to make it. I mean, everyone in LA, other than those who are from LA, are from somewhere else. Most of them are from somewhere else, and a lot of them are from some small town where it's the same sort of attitude. It's like, how do you get from A to B? So yeah.
Okay, I think trying to open up to others, and we've got any questions for you.
Uh-huh.
How did you know when you script was ready? Or how did you know when
Well, I think it's kind of that thing where generally you there's nothing you can lose. When you look at everything. I mean, The Ticking Man, there wasn't a single scene cut from in the cut. Normally in a film, when you go through editing, you decide there's a few things that kind of excess to requirement. But although this was a bit different because this film is kind of concept and structure. It's not a heavy narrative, character-driven piece. Although one of the key things was, in a sense, how do you create space and time for these very ordinary people to get on with their, because you're not living your day knowing you're going to get blown away at 12. So it's kind of, how do you create a sort of their lives in a way that was kind of engaging but believable. But you know, it's a hard one. I mean, typically I'd always say go for 2 or 3 drafts past the point you think you're ready. The Ticking Man was digital, although they don't have a Digibeta or DV cam in there, so that was just off DVD, and it kind of lacked some of the saturation and depth. But yeah, that was just digital, which you know, which was fine for the speed that we were kind of running around with it. It worked fine for us. Although it's a pity it wasn't now, where we have more opportunities. Mike. Me or anyone else? I mean, invariably, you'd say you'd be talking about, you know, everyone was paid on that. I mean, typically you'd be talking about, people normally spend about 100 on it. I'd say 100,000. You know, which years ago wouldn't have been possible before digital. So, you know. But and the problem nowadays is that in the old days you used to be able to make quite nice money on things like that, but because of digital, the irony is there's so many films being made, there's so many in the marketplace, the prices have collapsed. So you know, you sell it widely, but you get kind of nickels and dimes all around. So you know, it's a tough business that way. You know, but as I say, it's been distributed reasonably widely. And actually, the places where typically Scottish films wouldn't sell, like, I mean, Indonesia and Thailand and further afield, as well as a lot of Europe, and you know, since it's not, you know, Scottish films typically tend to just end up more in an art house market. So. Yeah. Well, Cannes it played at the Cannes market. I mean, most people think of Cannes in terms of the film festival and the razzmatazz, but it's the biggest film market in the world. The majority of people that go there for the market, and the market screens probably 15 times as many films as the festival, and so it screened at the market there. MIFED did better for us for sales, which was before that in Milan, but I don't know, you know. But yeah. I mean, that was all. I didn't go to the screening there because the sales agent just dealt with that. So, or I hope they did. You know. Hmm? Well, no, they take their commission and everything else. So, you know. Anyone else?
Nope. We're done. Okay. Well, I'd just like to say thanks for all coming along tonight.